Welcome, everyone. So we are going to talk this time about Kundalini and sort of like the idea of serpent power and what the meaning of Kundalini is and what it, how it manifests and all of that. And we're going to kind of see if this is a one-time talk or if it turns out that we need to do more. We often say that, and then sometimes we do more, but it's good to think about some of these things like Kundalini and give them space so that you could go into great depths or just
Skim the
surface.
Yeah, the surface is sacred too.
Surface is sacred too. Everything is sacred.
Fortunately for us.
And we thought of this topic in part because it's one that comes up with questions from students quite a bit from time to time. And it seems to also kind of go in and out of vogue in yoga, like, people having a Kundalini experience, and then what does that mean, etc. And Kundalini becomes more of a focus in general yoga and then subsides. Kind of once we've talked about Kundalini, that'll make sense because it's something that comes and goes. But and as I was thinking about it, just an introductory idea for me was that when I was first coming to yoga, like many of you probably, I really didn't know that much about yoga, and what it was doing for me at the time very much was allowing me to de-stress. I wasn't going at yoga to become enlightened. I didn't even know that was possible, and it's still, I'm still not. I'm still working on that one.
We're just going to change the definition so that you can make it.
But I came to yoga because I was kind of in a space in my life where I needed something, and I didn't know what it was I was looking for, and yoga seemed to be the right thing. And being probably like many of you, I have always felt kind of like an outsider in life anyway. And so even though I went to yoga with the idea of, oh, maybe this is something that can help me, I was also slightly put off by and this was like in the early, the middle 70s, early 70s, and then into the 80s. And I was a little bit put off by some of the sort of things that I ran into. One of them was, people having these wild stories about their Kundalini experience, and then as if this was something that was very, very positive, and I was not, capable of having it. Feeling like an outsider, I figured that was probably true, but I felt like there was this sort of hierarchy that was being presented, and it was really along the lines of things like where you'd be at an airport and people would be trying to sell you the Bhagavad Gita, or people would be doing all these sort of altered states things and then come to you as if, wow, I've got this power. And to me, what was off-putting was that I couldn't really see within those people that they were seeing me. And I also felt like they weren't showing me their authentic, whole experience.
Right,
They were sort of codifying it or defining what their experience was and then separating out from it slightly. And to me, that just didn't ever make sense. So Kundalini was something that was confusing to me.
Is this the fault of the Kundalini?
No,
Whatever that is.
Well, for about 45 years, I thought it was my fault, and maybe it is. Excuse me. Yeah. So one of the things that is a theme that we often talk about in these talks is that really when yoga is working, and this is true for Kundalini experiences, also is that the yoga is really working when we may have extraordinary moments and extraordinary experiences, but they are, in a sense, more, they make things more ordinary. They make us feel more grounded, more real, more whole, rather than extraordinary in the sense of special and different and not ourselves. And so that's one of the angles on Kundalini that I think is really important to pay attention to, is that there is a lot of confusion for people like me coming just early to yoga. There was a lot of confusion about, well, what is this experience of the Kundalini? But then also people who have experienced Kundalini, which in a sense is, just a spontaneous arising of energy that we'll talk about, that starts to be something that is held on to, or that is desired or becomes extraordinary in a way that separates it out from practical purposes. And that's this little element that we all tend to do with things, it's human nature to do that. And that resistance I felt when I was first coming to yoga, I think was a resistance to that dissonance of, this is something extraordinary and yet it doesn't feel real. And in a sense, things that are extraordinary are profoundly real. And so there is that dissonance that came upon me. And so we thought it would be helpful, and Richard's going to talk a little bit about what is, Kundalini, how is it talked about in some of the scriptures, and how is it experienced in the physical body, within the practices, and then what is the benefit of, and what does one gain from, experiencing the Kundalini.
Is that all?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
And I'll chime in.
Kunda, I think, I'll just start with Kundali is how she's often referred to, and Kundalini is a more modern term. But there's a very famous chant amongst, I think, a small circle of names, that from the Hatha Pradipika, and it's, I think, verse 64 of the 4th chapter of Hatha Pradipika, and it's preceded, so those of you who have your books nearby, and it's preceded from about 53 on through 54, to tell you something kind of nice. And so let's chant that.
Okay.
And then we'll see if maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
Okay. Om Sushumnayai Kundalinyai Sudhaye Chandrajanmane Manonmanye Namastubhyam Mahashaktye Chiratmane Om. So it starts out with adoration to, the ending I is a feminine dative to the beautiful Sushumna, which is just means the empty reed, literally, and it's also we've translated it to be the central channel, and we always, and at first, you make an image of it in your mind, and you think, oh, if I sit really well, it's the plumb line, And then you can go into, exactly where that plumb line goes, physically through the body. And still, when you do autopsies on people, and there's, there are plumb lines, but there's not an empty reed. And so it involves the improving one of your posture, and also you're not thinking about, oh, I'm going to get a Kundalini experience yet. You're just really getting grounded, literally, in your relation to the earth, if it's the plumb line, the openness of the heart. But the fact is that it's visualized as a tube, which goes all the way up to the what we call the moon, and then it keeps on going, and it's however long you want it to be. It's the Sushumna, and so this is to Sushumna as a feminine deity. So it's adoration to her.
To the feminine deity Sushumna, and that visualization really is a way to kind of open within your mind, which then reflects down into the body, an opening for what might be called prana or energy to kind of have freedom, but not freedom that's just sort of dispersed everywhere. It's a directed freedom, free.
Yeah, because it's an organization of your sensation or prana.
Yeah.
Prana is, it's always bad whenever you translate something, even any word, but prana is, of course, what do we mean by prana? Do we mean that which arises as your direct experience in terms of sensation, feeling, sound,
Thought patterns.
and thought patterns?
Yeah.
That's the final footnote, that they're also. But we're doing this, we're getting, you're starting to feel, to visualize it, to feel it. You have to go to the front, to the back, to the side, to the up, to the down, and so you're automatically doing a sophisticated yoga practice. Okay, and this is it's a good trick. Yeah, it's a good trick. Sushumnaya Kundalinyai is to the Kundalini, and Kunda, of course, means coil, and we're thinking of snakes. And probably everyone has seen a snake, and snakes are really all over the world. Snakes they're pretty, they're kind of scary, and the way they move is particularly yogic in terms of the wiggle. So they're wiggling side to side in wave patterns, and if you see a completely straight snake, it's a dead snake usually. And even
and when they do move, they represent this, because when they move, it's almost as if they've left some of themselves over here as they're moving in the opposite direction, which is, and then vice versa, those two come together. So it's really an embodied form of joining together opposite patterns and putting them into action. And then the idea of that pattern somehow relating to the Sushumna is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and Sushumna Kundalini. Oh, and then the next one is Sutaye. So Sutta, it means that which is a wonderful, super pleasant nectar and smell. So it's like, and I always think of the culinary arts as metaphors for that. But this is like sweet love. So, and all of these are considered to be the same thing that's happening. So, even though we want this Kundalini, we want the image, oh, she's going to wake up and go into the sushumna, but the sushumna is already composed 100% of that. And then the nectar, which is then coming, is, this sense of extreme joy and satisfaction. So to actually taste that nectar. And so the nectar, Chandra Janmane, is the final. That means it's born from the Chandra, which is the moon, which is traditionally represented up, back here at the conjunction of the three rivers. And so that's the right nostril is the Pingala, the left nostril, the Ida, the sun and the moon, which are very totally complementary. And then the central channel is the hidden river. And so back here is the conjunction. And then right above that, in the mythology, is where the moon is, although the left nostril is also considered the moon. But this is the moon which accumulates nectar from all of the different places that are not necessarily your places, but so all of a sudden inside of you, you have the this channel which is distributing nectar, which is like compassion and intelligence and humor from all of the different worlds around you.
And in a sense, it's the nectar that is born of interconnectedness.
Yes. Because the nectar comes when things actually interconnect. It could be two beings that all of a sudden, often briefly, but then they learn how to keep it. They find each other, and it's like, and there's a recognition of, oh, I know you. And it's not that, oh, you are in the condescending, oh, you are actually me, and I'm the only being, and too bad about you. Or you are the only being, and the too bad about me. But it's almost like a connection where both are just like, and so this is very much part of the devotional lineages. One encounters either Shiva or Vishnu, and it's not like, oh, you're separated, but it's almost a recognition of this mystery. And so that becomes the nectar. And what this nectar then does, manon manye, which is, it gives you this experience of, and this is also then feminine form. Manon manye is a feminine form of this. And it means you have a no-mind mind, which doesn't mean, what does that mean? And it's simply that the mind is stunned. And then also, due to the nature of the mind, you will probably at some point in this process notice that your mind is stunned. Wait a minute, but what about that? So, and gradually you experience the no-mind mind, which is the process, the lengthy process of waking. Manon manye, namastubhyam is a very nice, it's a very formal, tubhyam is, rather than saying namaste, this is more like, wow, it's much more respectful. Namastubhyam. Mahashakti, and this is also the same case, and the great Shakti, the divine Shakti, which is the Shakti of Shiva. And then the verse is clever because they never know whether you finish the whole text. And so, Chit Atmane, or in other words, it's just pure chit. Okay. And so we all know from our studies that chit just means pure awareness, and chitta means the functioning mind, thought processes. And so that you get in chitta vritti, nirodha is the suspension of chitta vritti. Then what you're left with is just chit.
Pure awareness. Yeah.
Just pure awareness, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And of course, you make a definition of it. But are you aware of the definition?
Yeah.
Because, and so the process really begins of the idea of raising Kundalini. There's the concept of, oh, if I can wake up this energy, which is all of this collected breath energy, and get it to condense. In other words, deal with all of the different thoughts, stories, and projections, and then through care, turn it back under my belly, right above the center of the pelvic floor, and make it go into the Western path by curling it, pulling it up and curling it back, and then it will maybe start to enter the opening of the Sushumna. And even if you get close to that, it has that stunning effect, and you might have the experience of body shaking or any of the different prana forms in the body becoming organized. You'll have this, oh, your hair stands on end, which is called horripilation. I think the word horrible and horripilation. It actually means hair. So your hair stands up. And it means that the intelligence is in your skin has awakened. And this is like dealing with some very deep part of the body. And gradually, through practice, you keep drawing it back, bringing it up. And we do this you can do this as you practice asana or as you're walking down the street. And so it's pretty much the basic practices.
Yeah.
And eventually, you're able to bring it up and up and up and up through the different elements, the different chakras, until finally that day when it's like you get to the moon, and then you have this experience, manonmanye. And this is where you experience no mind. And the mythology of it is that the feminine Kundalini, Shakti, she has awakened and she has returned to her boyfriend, Shiva, here. And the two then conjoin in this extreme joy and bliss. And that's considered stage one of the process. Mm-hmm. And most people at that point, well, many people at all the different points along the way think, I've got it. Let me take a selfie of this process. And they give up the practice.
Yeah, and things like the horripilation or the shaking or, just these new experiences can be very powerful and very wonderful, but also if they're, if they're taken out of context and sort of looked at as, wow, I'm having these, sort of siddhis happen to me, that's when things start to go awry. And that's true anywhere along the line when you're working with the Kundalini, that if you start letting the mind come in and dominate, which is it's prone to do because that's what it likes to do.
That's its job.
That's its job.
That's its job.
Get out of my way.
Is to label something, to make code for it, post it in the cloud. That's its job.
And
it's advanced technology. It's really good.
And if you do that, that's when you have stopped really interfacing. Because we were talking about the moon, in a sense, being this representation of interconnectedness. And I think that's what was bothering me in the beginning as a brand new student, was the lack of interconnectedness. I wouldn't have put it in those words then.
Yeah.
But when we have been distracted, in a sense, by some of these experiences, we then get ungrounded. We get out of the real world. It is extraordinary and not ordinary. And then
And it's
interconnection
still
ends.
composed 100% of this, the prana shakti.
Yeah.
This, so it is still something to be observed. Like, wow, and the whole idea is to observe it almost in the sense of being awestruck by it. But we work our way eventually, and it actually gets into this place where they actually get together and do their thing up in the moon. And a lot of times we interpret it mythologically. Oh, that's the total goal, is finally, we're out of here. And this is a classical thing, is that the purpose of yoga is to eliminate space and time, and because it's bad, because it's impermanent, it's useless. And this is kind of an awkward misunderstanding that then comes. And so, but then there's another text which everyone should, if you're interested in this, you should, it's called the Sandaya Lahari, or the Ocean of Beauty. And it's very esoteric about this, but there are two verses near the beginning, verse 9, in which that's the awakening of the Kundalini, and she comes up through all the different chakras, and eventually you have that wonderful nectar and indescribable happiness, sense of satisfaction that actually makes you free of, you don't need anything from any situation in the world. You don't even need to be respected or liked online, which I can't even imagine that, and then most people think, well, that's the end of the book. But then the next verse is very funny. They say, oh, so now, and that verse is preceded in the Hatha Pradipika by the practice of what's called Kachari Mudra. And Kachari, K means into Ka, or space. And this space, then, you mean just open. They don't even know what you mean, because you can't actually see space. You can only get the idea of space by things blossoming within space. Kachari means to enter into Ka, or space. And it's when you actually focus the mind and you make your tongue, and anyone can play with it. In fact, you can even do it out in public, and people won't know, in which your tongue becomes very quiet, because as you talk, of course, the tongue is moving. But then as you talk to yourself, turns out there's no self to talk to. As you talk to the great self, to
Spend
Shiva,
your whole life doing it,
or
too.
to Shakti, or to anyone, or if you talk to anybody that is irritating to you, or you're just talking, the tongue is actually having subtle sensation patterns translated through it, and those sensation patterns correspond to all of the ideas and stories and contexts around the particular thing you're thinking about. And so Kachari Mudra is when the tongue quiets itself and it stops its movement. And this you experience when you just relax your tongue. And so people often will, particularly in some yoga classes, some yoga non-practitioners, and where they train, of course, you train your tongue by stretching it and then cutting and pushing it and this is where I think it goes wrong for a lot of people. They really push the
Stretching
tongue
is where it goes
up
wrong.
into the soft palate,
Yeah.
and they think, man, if I just really pushed harder, and they find they have to cut this ligament, and if they can get it to stand straight up, so the tip of the tongue, and the tongue will actually do this once you train it, it'll stand, and it comes right under, the tip of the tongue is right under what's called the sphenoid tonsil, which is like a little tonsil, a little bulb that's right under the pituitary gland. And this is a mistaken way of practicing. And so when you simply merge your tongue, so the energy of the tongue spreads, and without effort or without conceptualization, it merges into the palate as if you were smiling. And that way you get proper gazing, drishti. But then the practice is, okay, that allows you then to cultivate an even more important practice, which is the descent of Kundalini. She says, see you later, and she goes back down, and this is in the Sandhya Lahari. She goes back down, bringing with her the nectar of compassion and relationship to all other beings through all of the different elements, particularly the heart, and then finally through your belly and the navel, finally back, and then she goes down and she takes a nap in the pelvic floor again, and that descent then allows the cultivation of, what's the mudra called? Yoni mudra. So Yoni mudra is and this is Yoni mudra is the perfection of Mula Bandha, and is actually allows then the awakening, the deeper opening of the central channel.
And so really, in a sense, the Kundalini awakening, even though sometimes for, some people who have experienced it, it's experienced as this one-time event or this, ongoing thing where you're stuck with it moving. But it really is this pattern of movement and pattern of whole body, whole internal form body of, the coiling in that way we were speaking of serpents moving, where it's a very sort of undulating movement that takes energy through the whole core of the body up and then comes back down in the same sort of form. And so in that way, it is not this ungrounding, separating experience. It's an experience that really deepens and broadens and quiets one's practice.
Because in that, you start to see that the functioning that manifests the world, which is basically the asmita, or the functioning of I, even though they're I amness, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, the kleshas, that this is also unutterably sacred and is worthy of actually mindful meditation to look at, and it allows one to look at fear, snakes. Snakes can be very dangerous, and all of the craziness of the mind, as well as the brilliance of the mind, are all objects of meditation and are to be looked at deeply rather than turning away from them, or rather than classifying them and throwing them into a category. So you'll have to come back. And so the ascent and then the descent of Kundalini is really allowing then the experience, then the re-experiencing of the world as it is and of other beings. And so this is a process that then might take a while. And so this is falling in line more with the Yoga Sutra, in which there might be this, once you get grounded in this central channel business and you start to experience, finally, you're ready to begin yoga. And which reminds me, of course, of the idea of the bodhisattva, that really, because all beings, and you want to keep working and keep using all of the different aspects of your mind to help others to wake up to this nectar.
And it's something that is this full body experience that you have, that where so many things we talk about are like this, where you yourself disappear, and where there is this, awesome impact, and you're just there, wide awake and real. And one of the things I love about the Hatha Pradipika, and we'll talk a little bit about some other texts that reference Kundalini too, but in the Hatha Pradipika, this is really what's being described by that chant, is this, full experience where you are in this state of bliss. And the very last line, of the text saying that if this is not what you have experienced, then all of this is just the babblings of a madman.
Of a crazy, the madman. They use, of course, the male.
Yes,
case,
mad person.
Yeah, a mad person. The babbling of a crazy person. The babblings of a crazy person. And people say, well, that couldn't be me because I'm not a crazy person. But we all have our inner, it's all there within our unconscious. Yeah. And we have to see it's amazing without running away from it.
And in a sense, having that last line in the Hatha Pradipika, I've always thought is just a cue for the reader, the practitioner, to say, am I really, truly experiencing this in this vast manner? Or am I taking it and making something out of it with my mind, and making something out of it maybe that is ego-driven? And if so, then you laugh and you say, there's the babblings of this mad person, and you begin again, because that text in particular, and all of these texts, and so many of the Buddhist texts too, are really emphasizing the necessity of consistent practice and of looking again at oneself to see if you are, you're being honest. We wanted to get also...
Oh, I had one more tantric thing. In the Vaishnava school of Radha and Krishna, so Radha and Krishna, they have to go, because there's so many complexities, but they are absolutely in love with each other. And so it's a very beautiful thing. And then what happens in the mythology of the stories is that situations arise and Krishna leaves, or in other aspects of it, sometimes Radha leaves, and they experience separation. And it's like, so, and it's like
anguish.
And and anguish, and they actually, Radha occasionally gets a little bit annoyed. There's even anger she feels at some of, but then she longs, she regrets it. But she's going through all of these different, very emotional states, and all of them are considered to be different forms of a very deep samadhi, that they reveal. And so, very important. Otherwise, so you're starting to look at the manifest, what is actually arising as this mystery, is just keep looking, keep practicing.
And in many of the tantric texts also, there's this sort of, the Kundalini is represented as, or is spoken of as, the union of the creative energy and the grounding energy of Shiva and Shakti. And so, which is a beautiful imagery, the male imagery and the female imagery, the idea of the creative force, which is the Shakti, and the strength and grounded force of the male. And that with, as the Kundalini is cultivated within oneself, these two perspectives and these two aspects of each of us that are already there, they unite. And they then become, just as in with Radha and Krishna, they become far more than either one alone. But then what happens...
Either one alone is, they can't really survive. They don't even...
Yeah, and what sometimes happens, though, is that because it's this sort of, it's this beautiful union, and it's, especially in the tantric notion, if you think, oh, this is tantric, there's this whole sort of veil of sexual, oh, this is cool. It's so almost like an adolescent view of, this is what the Kundalini is, and this is what this means when these two energies unite. And that's a phase. That's something to pay attention to, that indeed could be interpreted that way, but it is far bigger than that. It's not limited. One of the things I love about the idea of it being creative energy and the grounded in everyday life practical energy is that it's the reminder, when we even just imagine the central channel with this energy flow in it and back down and coming up and down and nourishing ourselves from that, is that it allows perspective taking. Because you have the perspective of Shiva and you have the perspective of Shakti. You have, Prakriti and Purusha, and you've got these two angles, so you're not so, you don't have your blinders on quite so deeply. And if you allow that interplay of being able to look at things from different perspectives to be part of your experience of perceiving, then depth that you might not have imagined starts to kind of present itself. And when you're grounded through these practices, then it's remarkably mind-opening and heart-opening, and a route for connecting to life and to others. And so, although it is a very interesting thing to read some of the myths about these two forms, the Shiva and the Shakti, it's also wonderful to feel them within one's own self and then look at them in terms of the feeling of the softness of the tongue, the feeling of the softness of the gaze, which is the gaze being, I'm not going to just see things my way in my samskaric manner. And that's something that is a benefit that comes from entertaining these kind of Kundalini practices.
Yeah. Well, the idea again of the gaze, the soft gaze, where you're not just focusing on some and trying to do away with the background of something, but you completely soften the language making aspect, and you just gaze like an innocent creature, an innocent baby or something. And gaze also, of course, refers to a philosophical system, but the fun part is that the philosophical systems reflect instantly in the sensation, the flow of prana through the different channels or rivers. And so the correct gaze, so in physical yoga, you start with correct gaze. Then, of course, in the Eightfold Path of Buddha, it's samyak drishti. You have a correct view of things. And you think, oh, that's philosophy. I'm just going to go do yoga. Or yogis think, oh, I can't do that. And but the two are intertwined. And but the ability then to, the male and the female, one allows you to focus. So let's say the male quality will allow you to focus your mind, and then the female allows you to look deeply at it. And then, but the pattern in yoga is you focus the mind, you look deeply, and then when you look really deeply, you start to see interconnectedness, interpenetration. You start to see the whole, and you go, and then you have to keep practicing, because the thing that made you focus your mind, you have to then look at that. Focus on what made you focus, which was your, I hate to use the term, religious conviction or form or idols. Or
You love to use that
I
term.
love that term.
Yeah.
And then eventually you start to see deeper and deeper that way.
Yes.
And that's the whole patterning. That's the beauty of the yoga traditions rather than the yoga tradition.
But, if you know someone or you yourself have had some of these experiences where you've had sort of dysregulated energy, or if you feel that you've had, a Kundalini experience or Kundalini awakening, we've worked with students sometimes who that can then become like either frightening or empowering, and really becomes a place where the practice then stops, because it becomes the sole focus of, I want to have that experience again. It was so cool, or it's terrifying, or whatever perception you have of that. And really, truly, if you think of it in terms of Shiva and Shakti, of the groundedness and the creative energy, the creative energy would be the part that is kind of making the sort of the horripilation happen, in a sense. And that's okay if the groundedness is still there. So if one is stuck, or if you have a student who's stuck with or feeling very dominated by a Kundalini experience, it is often really beneficial to focus on the out-breath, to really extend the gap at the end of the out-breath, and to not to say, oh, this is a bad thing that's happening, but to have the sense that I'm going to not draw conclusions one way or the other, that this is good, bad, or neutral. I'm just going to notice, and this is what you were saying, this is, chit. This is awareness. I'm going to bring awareness to that experience. And the way I can stay most clear in my observation of that is to be grounded, because the physical experience sometimes of something that would probably be the beginnings of a Kundalini categorization of a Kundalini thing, that what will keep it from going astray is to stay with feet on the ground, connected. So the out breath is very often what can be helpful. And we've had students sometimes who've come to us who've been resistant to getting grounded during that, and then some who have been very, very terrified and almost wanted to give up practicing. And both of those are sad, because if you give up practicing, these, as we said in the beginning, the Kundalini, in a sense, is this spontaneous arising of this energetic patterning. And if that has happened, however that's happened, that's a good sign. It's just, you know, when it gets frightening, then you pause, you step away from it, you back down, you find a good teacher, you get grounded. And the same basic principle with if you've gotten inflated over it, you stop, you might have to be pulled away from it by someone, clawed away from it. But and so it's not to make light of it, because this is something that does happen within the yoga world, is that people, through breathing techniques, through practices that they do, you know, we're what, 70 or 80% water, but we're a lot of energy too. It's probably 100% energetic patterning within our embodied experience. And Kundalini, in its very sort of maybe banal and practical sense, is a means of visualizing an organization of these remarkable energies that we all have, that when we allow them to be interfacing, they take us places we can't imagine, that are not only good for ourselves,
but good for
others.
others. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so, of course, grounding means to touch others. And of course, the exhale, apana, is usually associated with serpents. So it's a return to earth, a return to helping others. And so the thing is, people think, oh, I should just give up. Well, if you practice, inflation and hyperventilation, which is a form of too much inflation, you really float away, and you need to adjust the practice. Adjusting the practice, so we enshrine a practice, and so this is how you have to practice, and we'll pound it out on tablets and hang it in the classrooms, in certain states or something. This is how you practice, but the practice is how you adjust to the actual what's going on. And so sometimes the practice might be adjusted to micro movements or micro vinyasa, or it might be big ones, or you might go off and, there's so many different ways that the practice should be and can be adjusted. And this is why it's helpful to have a good sangha or a good community, not only of people who are part of your particular, what they call kula, or family, which is the root of the word cult, but to go intercult. So between the different cults, because they can exchange information. It's just like cultures.
Yeah.
So don't give up.
Yeah. Yeah, we just barely scratched the surface, it seems.
I think so, yeah. We just barely.
But it's been almost an hour. So we had a whole list of other things we were thinking about, but maybe we'll save them, weave them in somewhere else. But we wanted to really leave you with this notion that, this idea that the Kundalini is this remarkable aspect of the practice. And the process of visualizing the sushumna, the body with the coiled snake, and the snake rising and moving in the ways that snakes move, and then the nectar, becoming part of the process as the snake moves back down, and this nectar filling the whole, your whole being, and seeping out into the rest of the world, and making it making that kind of depth of experience the everyday experience. That's what Kundalini is about, not making it something that is, so extraordinary that only the select few can do it. And so it's this wonderful tool to catch any part of, even if you just kind of have this clunky, vague vision of this beautiful, structure that you described, even if you just get a little bit of what it means to bring the breath up and the Kundalini up, that's where you start. And it's fabulous because it can take you into realms that allow you to have that vision that is not stuck in your samsaric view, that has both the creative energy and the grounded energy. Yeah.
And then the paradox is, if you're stuck, just observe that you're stuck, because being stuck is the sacred Shakti itself. But observing it, that's the key. Just, oh, look again. Wow, that's amazing.
And the stuckness, I've learned from you, I'm learning, this is like 50 years later, when I feel stuck, I just try harder. And often, maybe that's not the best thing to do. Maybe it's better to just soften the tongue, soften the gaze, soften the shoulders, not try so hard. Because all of these things described with the deities, etc., they are ways of describing the natural experience of what it means to be human. And you're having the direct experience of it right now, so wake up to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll chant the chant one more time, and we'll have it posted on our website with a chant and the PDF you can download probably soon. Other chants are up there in that way. But yeah, let's chant it one more time just to feel that sense of it.
Okay. Sushumna. Okay. Om Sushumnayai Kundalinyai Sudhaye Chandrajanmane Manonmanyai Namastubhyam Mahashaktyai Chitatmane Om.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.